Okay, so I just watched um Save the Last Dance. And honestly, most of the time I've when I've watched this before, I've been like, "Oh, I like this movie." It's like dancing, it's hip hop, it's black people, you know. But when I really kind of, looked a little closer at the story, I don't love it, honestly, because I realized that while watching it from this lens, because I am a person who does racial work, with people, you know, inter interracial dynamics, with different couples and stuff like that. I was like, I don't love this dynamic. I don't like I just felt like I counted 3 different times in the movie where he had to apologize to the white girl. Sarah is her name was her name, and his name was Derek, and he was going to medical school and stuff like that. But, like, yeah, while they were, like, becoming a couple, he had to apologize to her 3 different times, and like she never apologized to him, you know? And also remembering, like, when she, like, kinda, came at him, like, with his friend, Malachi, who's a thug, whatever. He's living a black man's life, which is what he talks about in the movie. Like, she never says, like, "Oh, I'm sorry," like, like, "I don't really understand, the dynamic. I don't understand, how he's got your back and stuff like that, and why you would be loyal to him." She doesn't say that. She just like, it's just like you have to like, and these are the messages that we're being taught and fed about ourselves as black people, and also like, um, you know, uh about white people, like they're supposed to be the the good ones, you know what I mean? And also recognizing like the whole story is really about him helping her. Like, right? Like the whole thing, like, yeah, there's a lot of different, dynamics that could be talked about around his family. Like his mom wasn't there, you know what I mean? They live with their grandma, it seems like, and stuff like that. And so it's like, what about that? What about that dynamic? You know what I mean? And like it's just like he's like this savior, and also, but then he's also putting a lot of sacrifice into being with her. You know what I mean? When we really look at like history, tells us that like actually being with white women for black men is very dangerous, and history tells us that. Like it's actually very dangerous for black men. And like so it's just all these different, stories and different ways of twisting the story, the narrative, right? But I just really was like recognized when this black man had to say sorry to this woman, this girl several times, and he's a very smart, a good guy, and I love that scene when they're at the doctor's office with the baby, and um his sister, Carrie Washington, was the actress. But she like it says like, listen, like look around, like you know what, like she's like, we're in different worlds, and trying to school her, trying to let her know what's up. Like, listen, we live a totally different life. You know what I'm saying? Even though whatever you're here, and but like we have different rules for how we live, and I think the whole story is about that. Malachi, he's telling that like, listen, like you can walk away with this woman. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like emphasis like of the black community being like, oh, you can't be with them. Don't be with him. Don't be with her. Da da da. But the reality is she didn't have any really like idea of what was happening, what was going on socially, politically, with the people she was found herself with. And that feels irresponsible. And I mean, she's a high schooler, right? But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, it just not knowing the ignorance creates problems. That's what I think. And so I really like, there were just some different dynamics in this story that I was like, I don't really love this. And I also like, I feel like, whatever, they could go on to college and they'd probably move away from each other. And, he could probably, if he really wants a black woman, he can find a great, black woman to be with, right? Maybe she was just a stop. This white woman was a stop on the road to like having the black queen that he deserves. That's what I would say. Because like, you know what I mean? Like the ignorance is a problem. You know what I mean? And that's always like my thought is like, if you yeah, you can be blissful, right? Like, but when you actually open your eyes and look around at what's happening, yeah, you're gonna have a rude awakening. You know what I mean? And I feel like I think a lot of us are dealing with this right now. So anyway, I don't hate the movie, but like, I just recognize like, I don't know. There's just a lot of different stories like this. Where you're gonna kind of dig it a little bit more and figure out what's actually going on here. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's my little review. Let me know what you think about around these like Rachel dynamics. And I will talk to you soon. Love ya.